In the vast, uncharted reaches of the galaxy, the once quiet hum of human civilization had turned into the roar of a rising empire. It wasn't always this way. Just a century ago, humanity was nothing more than a small, fragmented species, barely scraping by in their own solar system. But in the wake of Earth's most significant breakthrough, a leap in faster-than-light travel, everything changed. Humanity was no longer limited to their small corner of the universe. The stars, once distant, unreachable, now beckoned them, promising both untold riches and terrifying unknowns. It didn't take long for humans to spread across the galaxy, building colonies on planets once thought to be inhospitable, and forging trade routes to alien worlds. Earth had once been a singular, isolated home, but now it was the pulsing heart of an interstellar empire, the center of a dominion unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The human military, once a small force used to defend borders on Earth, had transformed into a powerful, galaxy-spanning fleet. These soldiers were no longer just protectors of their homeland, they were conquerors, explorers, and diplomats all in one. Every new world they encountered, whether inhabited or not, was viewed as a piece of the ever-expanding puzzle that was the human dominion. Humanity's arrival was not subtle. The sheer force of their will, combined with their unparalleled adaptability and relentless drive, left a mark on every planet they touched. Where once the towering empires of ancient alien species ruled supreme, humans quickly asserted themselves, bringing with them new technologies, ideas, and an insatiable thirst for progress. But not all the galaxy's inhabitants were pleased by the human expansion. On the fringes of known space, the powerful and ancient Cinder, an insectoid species with a brutal military doctrine, took notice. For centuries, the Cinder had ruled over their territory with an iron fist, crushing all who dared to oppose them. But now, for the first time in their long history, they faced an adversary who was not only willing to fight back but to expand with even greater ferocity. The Cinder viewed humanity's rise as a direct challenge to their dominance. Their warlords gathered, their military councils held urgent meetings, and their fleets were placed on high alert. This new species, these humans, would not be allowed to disrupt the status quo. The Cinder would put an end to the human threat, before it had a chance to grow too large. Meanwhile, back in the heart of the human dominion, President Catherine Rhodes, a formidable leader whose vision had been key to the rise of human influence, stood in the war room of the flagship Dominion's dawn. Surrounded by her council of generals, strategists, and ambassadors, she studied the data streams of the expanding frontier. With every passing day, the reach of humanity extended further into space, bringing them closer to the Cinder's territory. "We are facing a crossroads," President Rhodes said, her voice firm but calm. "Our expansion has been nothing short of miraculous. But the Cinder are not fools. They will not wait forever before they strike." Her words were met with silence, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on the room. For years, humanity had relied on diplomacy, trade, and peace to secure new worlds, but it was clear now that peace might no longer be an option. The Cinder were coming, and they were bringing war with them. General Marcus Holden, a seasoned veteran who had fought in multiple skirmishes along the human front lines, stepped forward. "We've encountered their kind before. Their tactics are brutal, but we've learned how to adapt. If they want a fight, they'll get one. But we need to be ready. We need to build our strength, consolidate our forces. And we need to make sure our colonies are secure." Rhodes nodded, understanding the gravity of Holden's words. Humanity had come a long way, but the road ahead was fraught with peril. The Cinder were not just another alien race to be outsmarted or avoided, they were a powerful, war-hardened enemy. The time for diplomacy was quickly fading. "Prepare for war," Rhodes said, her voice ringing with the authority of a leader who knew the weight of her decision. "But we will do this on our terms. We will not only defend our worlds, we will expand them. We will show the galaxy what it means to challenge the human dominion." The council members exchanged glances, and for the first time in the meeting, a sense of unity washed over the room. They were not merely defending their right to exist, they were asserting their place among the stars. This was humanity's moment. The Cinder would not defeat them, and the galaxy would not forget the name of the human dominion. the first wave of human warships, led by the Dominion's Dawn, began their slow journey toward the Cinder border. The fate of the galaxy was about to be rewritten, and the human legacy would be one of conquest, resilience, and unyielding determination. As the Dominion's Dawn and its fleet of human warships moved steadily toward the Cinder border, tension gripped the galaxy. The once imposing border between the human Dominion and the Cinder Empire was about to be breached, and no one knew what would come next. The Cinder had never faced an opponent like humanity. It wasn't just that humans were willing to fight, they were relentless in their pursuit of victory. Across the galaxy, humanity's allies began to prepare for the storm. Planets that had long enjoyed the benefits of human trade and protection now found themselves in a precarious position. Some pledged their loyalty to the human Dominion, while others, fearful of the impending war, began to withdraw into isolation, unsure whether the Cinder's wrath would reach them. President Catherine Rhodes convened a series of urgent meetings with her closest military advisors, strategists, and diplomats. The decision to go to war with the Cinder wasn't an easy one. The Cinder's military was vast and brutal, their war machines powered by ancient technologies that even the humans' advanced science couldn't easily replicate. Yet, Rhodes knew that humanity could not afford to cower in fear any longer. The galaxy was too vast, and Earth's legacy too important. Every decision we make now will shape the future of humanity, Rhodes told her team, her voice unwavering. We must strike quickly, with precision. If we leave even a crack in their defenses, they'll exploit it. The Cinder's strength lies in their ruthlessness. We must show them that humanity is not easily broken. General Marcus Holden, who had spent years studying the Cinder's tactics, spoke next. They will come at us with everything they have. They know our strength, but they've underestimated our flexibility. They're used to domination through fear and sheer force. We will hit them where it hurts most, by disrupting their supply lines, targeting their infrastructure, and forcing them into a position where they cannot sustain their war effort. The human fleet was already prepared for battle. The Dominion's Dawn, a massive flagship, was flanked by a dozen destroyers and a host of smaller, more agile vessels. Each ship was equipped with advanced weaponry, shields, and specialized drones capable of striking at the heart of Cinder targets. But it wasn't just the human military that had a secret weapon, it was their people. Humanity's adaptability, ingenuity, and sheer determination had already begun to turn the tide in previous skirmishes, and now, more than ever, it would be tested. The first skirmish with the Cinder came sooner than expected. As the fleet crossed into Cinder territory, human sensors detected an ambush. Cinder ships, sleek and deadly, materialized from the shadows of an asteroid field. Their insectoid forms glowed with an eerie light as they launched a barrage of missiles and energy beams. The humans reacted quickly. Shields flared to life, absorbing the initial strikes, and the Dominion's Dawn unleashed a devastating wave of counterfire. Human fighters swarmed the enemy ships, weaving through the chaos of laser blasts and explosions. In the blink of an eye, the first Cinder cruiser was destroyed, its remains scattered across the void. The Cinder retaliated fiercely, their tactics brutal and unforgiving. They sent wave after wave of bombers and drones, each strike designed to break the human fleet's formation. Yet, time and time again, humanity proved their mettle. The Cinder's reliance on overwhelming force was their greatest strength, but it also became their greatest weakness. Humans adapted quickly, creating new tactics on the fly and utilizing every ship in their fleet to its maximum potential. On the surface of a barren planet, the Cinder launched a ground offensive. Their massive war machines, towering behemoths of metal and alien biology, marched across the terrain, crushing everything in their path. But the humans were ready. Hidden beneath the surface, a fleet of human landers and armored mechs prepared for the fight. The first human strike team dropped from the sky, hitting the Cinder forces where they least expected. With precision and firepower, the humans tore through the Cinder's advanced war machines, forcing them to retreat. As the battle raged on, a surprising development occurred. The Cinder, though fierce, had never been pushed to this extent. They were used to ruling through fear, but humanity's tenacity was starting to erode that foundation. For the first time, doubt crept into the hearts of the Cinder leadership. Perhaps these humans were not just a threat to their borders, they were a threat to their very way of life. President Rhodes watched the unfolding conflict from the safety of her flagship. "We've made our mark. But this is only the beginning," she said, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "We need to push forward. We can't stop now." As the first battle of the Human Cinder War drew to a close, the human fleet stood victorious, though the price had been steep. But the victory was clear. The Cinder had underestimated humanity. They had no idea that, once roused, the full might of the human dominion would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity's fire was burning brightly now, and there was no turning back. The war for the stars had just begun, and the human dominion was determined to shape the future in its image. The war with the Cinder had erupted across the galaxy, and humanity's victory at the Battle of Koth Prime was nothing short of a revelation. The Cinder had been forced to retreat, but their defeat had not been as total as President Rhodes would have liked. The human fleet had decimated part of the Cinder's military, but deep within their ancient empire, the Cinder warlords were already regrouping, plotting their next moves. Humanity's military expansion into Cinder space didn't come without consequences. It had shaken the foundations of galactic power. The Cinder were not the only force threatened by the rise of humanity. The Orcs, a mysterious race of psychic beings with telekinetic and telepathic abilities, had taken notice. For centuries, the Orcs had watched the galaxy from their hidden worlds, intervening only when the balance of power was disrupted too much. Now, humanity's rise to prominence threatened that delicate balance. The Orcs had their own agenda, and it did not include allowing Earth to dominate the stars. But even as war raged on the front lines, humanity faced its own internal fractures. While the human military and the government under Rhodes' leadership stood united, not all humans were thrilled with the growing influence of the human dominion. Rebellions began to stir in the far reaches of the galaxy, especially in systems that had been forced to join the Dominion through coercion or outright invasion. These systems, often home to thriving civilizations that had long been self-governed, found themselves unwillingly swept into the war. The first spark of rebellion ignited on Etheris, a mining world once rich with resources but now drained by the demands of the human dominion. The people of Etheris had once enjoyed relative autonomy, but with the arrival of human settlers and the conscription of their youth into the war effort, the balance tipped. Dissidents, once vocal but largely ignored, rallied under the banner of a charismatic leader, Yarrick Solon, a former human officer turned revolutionary. Yarrick had once fought for the Dominion, a soldier who believed in the promise of a unified galaxy under human rule. But his experiences on the front lines had changed him. The brutality of the conflict, especially the exploitation of colonies like Etheris, had opened his eyes to the true cost of human expansion. The promises of prosperity and peace had come at a price: the lives of innocent civilians, the destruction of entire cultures, and the forced conscription of the galaxy's inhabitants. "We are not mere pawns in someone else's game," Yarrick declared in his first broadcast, his voice a mixture of anger and resolve. "The human dominion has taken everything from us. Now it's time to take it back." His words resonated with the people of Etheris. They had known hardship, but now, they had a leader who promised them something more than mere survival. Under Jarrek's leadership, the rebellion grew, recruiting thousands from Etheris and beyond. The people who had once been silent now rallied to his cause, their anger fueling the fire that would soon burn throughout the galaxy. President Rhodes, aware of the brewing unrest, called for an emergency meeting. The Dominion could not afford to lose ground to internal dissent. The war with the Cinder was already proving costly, and now a rebellion threatened to destabilize entire sectors of human-controlled space. Rhodes had always known that power, once gained, was fragile. But this was more than just a small uprising, it was a symptom of a deeper discontent that ran through the galaxy's underbelly. "We cannot allow this rebellion to spread," Rhodes said grimly. "If we do, we risk losing everything we've fought for. We need to act swiftly." General Marcus Holden, ever pragmatic, was the first to speak. "We should send in forces to crush the rebellion before it gathers too much strength. Etheris is just one world. If we show them that resistance is futile, we can quell the unrest. But Rhodes hesitated. There was something about Yarrick Solon that unnerved her. She had read his speeches, seen his public appearances. His charisma was undeniable, and his message had found a surprising amount of support, even among some of humanity's own ranks. She knew that crushing the rebellion by force could ignite a larger, more dangerous insurgency across the galaxy. There's more at play here than just a few angry rebels, she said thoughtfully. Yarrick Solon is more than a symbol. He's a leader who knows how to rally people to his cause. If we attack them head-on, we risk making him a martyr. Holden frowned, clearly disagreeing. We cannot afford to be merciful, President. The Cinder are not the only threat out there. If we let this rebellion fester, we'll be fighting a war on two fronts, one in the stars and one within our own borders. Rhodes took a deep breath, staring out at the holographic map of human-controlled space. We need to change our approach. I will send a diplomatic envoy to Etheris. We'll offer a chance for peace, and a chance for these rebels to surrender. But make no mistake, we're not negotiating with terrorists. If they reject our offer, we will have no choice but to eliminate them. The envoy was dispatched, led by an experienced diplomat, Elena Voss. Voss was known for her ability to speak to even the most hardened of adversaries, to find common ground where others saw only conflict. She had been a key player in many of humanity's peace treaties, and Rhodes hoped that she could convince the people of Etheris to lay down their arms and rejoin the fold of the human dominion. But as Voss's shuttle descended onto Etheris' dusty surface, she found herself confronted with a people not just willing to fight for their freedom, they were willing to die for it. Elena Voss's shuttle touched down on the desolate surface of Etheris under a cold, gray sky. The planet, once a bustling mining hub, now seemed like a graveyard, its factories abandoned, its fields of mineral-rich dust left untouched for years. But it wasn't the bleak landscape that drew her attention, it was the sheer defiance in the eyes of the people she was about to meet. The doors of the shuttle opened with a hiss, revealing a squad of human soldiers in their standard-issue armor. The air was thick with tension, the faint hum of the shuttle's engines still reverberating through the atmosphere. Elena stepped out first, flanked by a small diplomatic team. Her posture was straight, her expression calm. This was not her first time negotiating in hostile territory. But she knew that Etheris was different. Yarrick Solon's rebellion had stirred something deep within the hearts of the people, a fire that was unlikely to be extinguished by words alone. She was met by a delegation of rebels, ragged, battle-worn, and full of resentment. At their head was Yarrick himself, his face a mixture of resolve and anger, eyes that had once been full of idealism now hardened by war. He had the charisma of a leader, a voice that could command armies, and a presence that made even the most seasoned diplomats take pause. Elena Voss, the face of the human dominion, Yarrick said, his tone laced with bitter amusement. Come to convince us that we're better off under your boot? Voss remained unfazed, her calm demeanor never wavering. I'm not here to fight, Yarrick. I'm here to offer peace. The Dominion doesn't want to crush your people, we want to bring you back into the fold. But if you resist, there will be consequences. The Cinder are a threat to us all. We cannot afford division right now. His laugh was harsh, bitter. You think your peace offer means anything to us? You say the Cinder are a threat, but all I see is a threat in your eyes. The Dominion doesn't care about us, Elena. It never has. Etheris, just like every other world you've conquered, is nothing more than a resource to you. You used us, and now you want us to kneel. Voss could feel the weight of his words, the righteous fury that had driven Yarrick to take up arms against the very system that had once been his own. She knew that the roots of his rebellion weren't just in the exploitation of Etheris's resources, they were buried in the harsh reality that many of humanity's colonies had endured under the Dominion's rule. And that, more than anything else, was what had created this fracture in the galaxy. You're wrong, Yarrick, Voss said, her voice firm. The Dominion is far from perfect, but we can change it. Earth's leadership is not blind to the suffering of its colonies. We can make things right, together. But this rebellion, this war, it will only make it harder for us all to survive. We need unity now, more than ever. And we need to focus on the real enemy, the Cinder. Jarek's eyes narrowed. You want us to stop fighting for freedom so that you can fight a war for power? The Cinder are nothing more than a convenient excuse to keep us under your thumb. We've been your puppets long enough, Elena. I won't let Etheris fall to your empire. A tense silence hung between them, the air charged with the unspoken history of human expansion. Voss knew the reality. If the rebellion continued to spread, it would create a fracture so deep that the Dominion might never recover. But Yarrick wasn't wrong in his accusations either. The weight of humanity's actions on the colonies couldn't be ignored. There had been too many promises broken, too many injustices swept under the rug. I'm offering a chance to change things, Yarrick, she said, softer now. But the choice is yours. Surrender, and you can help us build something better. Continue down this path, and you'll lose more than just your lives. You'll lose any hope of a future where humanity stands together. Yarrick was quiet for a moment, his face a mask of thought. Then, he spoke, his voice low, but resolute. You think we're the problem? You think Etheris is the problem? No, Elena. The real problem is the system you defend. The Cinder are a threat, yes, but so are you, your government, your so-called Dominion. You've already turned your back on the people you claim to protect. With that, Yarrick turned and walked away, motioning for his followers to retreat. Voss watched them go, the weight of his words heavy in her chest. She had failed to convince him. But she wasn't ready to give up. She couldn't be. The rebellion had just begun, and Yarrick Solon was not someone who could be easily silenced. As she returned to her shuttle, her mind raced. The war had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. The rebellion on Etheris was no longer a small fire, it was a full-fledged movement, and if left unchecked, it would spread like wildfire across the galaxy. But there was one thing that Voss knew for certain now: Yarrick wasn't just a rebel leader. He was the face of something far larger than a single rebellion. If the human Dominion wanted to survive this war, they would have to change, not just their tactics, but their very approach to governance. The next phase of this conflict was no longer just about defeating the Cinder. It was about winning the hearts and minds of the galaxy, and if the Dominion couldn't find a way to heal its fractures, the rebellion would burn them all to the ground. As the conflict on Etheris spiraled further into chaos, the Cinder quietly observed from the shadows of their empire, biding their time. They had seen humanity's strength in battle and understood the dangers that the human Dominion posed to their centuries-old reign. But in the deepest corners of the galaxy, another force stirred, an enigmatic race that had remained neutral for millennia, watching the rise and fall of civilizations without ever truly intervening. That was about to change. The Orcs were a race of psychic beings, capable of manipulating the fabric of reality with their minds. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had encountered, but they had never openly engaged in galactic politics. To them, the wars of lesser species were nothing more than fleeting distractions. However, the sudden surge of human power had caught their attention. The balance of the galaxy was shifting, and the Orcs, protectors of that delicate balance, had decided it was time to act. On their homeworld, hidden deep within an uncharted nebula, an assembly of their leaders convened. The High Council, a group of powerful Orcs psychics, sat in their crystalline chamber, their minds linked in a collective consciousness. They could feel the growing instability in the galaxy, the ripple of war spreading through the stars. But what concerned them most was the surge of emotion and willpower that had arisen from the human race. Humanity is a force unlike any we've encountered before, said Zorath, the High Council's most powerful telepath. His voice echoed inside the minds of the others, soft yet filled with an intensity that demanded attention. They do not simply fight for survival. They fight with purpose, with a drive that transcends mere conquest. Their expansion will destabilize the entire galaxy if left unchecked. I agree, replied Lyra, another member of the council, her presence sharp and unyielding. The human Dominion has already begun to break through the old barriers of control. Their growth is exponential. They will soon be impossible to ignore, and their unpredictability makes them dangerous. If we do not intervene, they could unravel everything. The council fell silent for a moment as the Arcaris weighed their options. To intervene directly in the human conflict was risky. It would bring them into direct confrontation with the Dominion, a powerful force that might one day rival their own. But the alternative, allowing humanity's unchecked rise, was a threat they could not ignore. We must act, Zorith concluded, his mind setting the course of their next steps. The Cinder will not be enough to halt humanity's progress. If we wish to preserve the stability of the galaxy, we must make them see the consequences of their expansion. We will send a message, a signal. If humanity truly desires to rule the stars, they must first learn the price of their ambition. At that moment, their decision was made. The Arcaris would make their presence known, not by direct assault, but through a subtle manipulation of the human psyche. They would force humanity to confront the darker aspects of its own nature and the consequences of unrestrained growth. They would test the will of the human dominion, by pushing them to the brink of moral collapse. Meanwhile, on Etheris, the rebellion was far from subdued. Yarrick Solan's resistance continued to rally support across the galaxy, his speeches gaining traction even among the soldiers and colonists who had once served the Dominion. His message was simple yet powerful: the human Dominion, with all its promises of prosperity and unity, was a lie. The real purpose of the human Dominion was power, and the price of that power was the destruction of freedom. As more colonies joined the rebellion, the Dominion's military was stretched thin. Resources that could have been directed to the front lines against the Cinder were now diverted to quell uprisings, putting the entire war effort at risk. President Rhodes found herself facing a dilemma: how could she maintain control over her ever-expanding empire without losing the support of the very people it was built to protect? General Marcus Holden had always been a pragmatic leader, and his advice had kept the Dominion afloat in the face of early setbacks. But even he was beginning to see the writing on the wall. The rebellion was no longer a minor nuisance, it was a galvanizing movement that threatened to tear the Dominion apart from within. "I've been thinking," Holden said one evening in the war room, his gaze focused on the holographic map that displayed the galaxy's current conflicts. "This war isn't just about defeating the Cinder. The real battle is over control of the narrative. Jarek's movement is more than just an armed rebellion. It's a battle for the hearts and minds of the galaxy." Rhodes listened intently, her fingers steepled in thought. "So what do you propose?" "We need to change the way we approach this," Holden replied. "We can't just crush the rebellion with brute force. If we do that, we'll alienate more systems, and the fractures will only deepen. We need to show the galaxy that we're listening. That we understand their grievances." Rhodes considered his words carefully. "You're suggesting we negotiate with the rebels?" Holden shook his head. "No. I'm suggesting we give the people of the galaxy something more than just a military presence. We need to reform. If we want to survive, we have to show that we're capable of change, that we can evolve beyond the rigid structures we've set up." Before Rhodes could respond, an alarm blared through the command center, its red lights flashing urgently. An incoming transmission from an unknown source. "Put it through," Rhodes ordered. The holographic display flickered, and a voice filled the room, calm, controlled, but unnervingly cold. "This is Zorith of the Arcaris," the voice said. "We have been watching you, President Rhodes. Your rise has disturbed the balance of the galaxy, and now, you will be forced to confront the consequences. This war, this rebellion, is nothing compared to what is coming. Your expansion has awakened forces beyond your comprehension." The hologram shifted, and the image of a psychic energy storm exploded across the display. For a moment, the room seemed to grow cold as the Council's message echoed in their minds. "You will learn what it means to wield power you do not yet understand. We will watch." The transmission ended. The message was clear: the Arcaris were no longer content to stay in the shadows. Humanity's rise had drawn their attention, and now, it seemed, the true cost of expansion was about to be paid. The message from the Arcaris hit humanity like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves throughout the human dominion. For the first time, Earth and its colonies were confronted with a threat that was not just military but deeply, almost metaphysically, unsettling. The Arcaris were not like the Cinder, with their vast fleets and martial prowess. They were something else entirely, an ancient and mysterious race that could manipulate the very fabric of space and time with the power of their minds. The fear they invoked wasn't just of weapons or war, but of something more profound, the fragility of human existence in a universe governed by forces beyond comprehension. President Rhodes found herself standing at the precipice of a decision that could define the future of humanity. She had always known that power came with consequences, but she had never imagined that those consequences could come from forces beyond her control. And now, with the Arcaris' warning still echoing in her mind, she was faced with the growing rebellion and an empire stretched too thin. The war against the Cinder, the uprisings in the colonies, and the psychic threat of the Arcaris, it was all converging into one overwhelming storm. "General Holden," she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty she felt, "we need to rethink our strategy. This isn't just about defeating the Cinder or putting down a rebellion anymore. The Arcaris are right. We've awoken something far greater than ourselves." Holden, ever the pragmatic strategist, nodded grimly. "The Cinder may be a threat, but they're nothing compared to the Arcaris. We've faced enemies with technology before, but we've never faced anything like this. They could destroy entire fleets without firing a shot. They could manipulate entire populations without them even knowing it. Then we need to show them that humanity won't be intimidated," Rhodes replied, her voice hardening. "We need to unite our people, not just under the banner of war, but under the banner of something greater. We need to prove that we're not just conquerors, we're something more." While Rhodes began to chart a course of diplomacy and reform for the human dominion, Yerrick Solan's rebellion continued to swell in strength. His movement was no longer just a ragtag group of insurgents, it had evolved into a full-scale revolution, one that was galvanizing the hearts of countless colonies across the galaxy. As the rebellion spread, so too did Jarek's influence. More and more systems that had once bowed to the Dominion now began to question their loyalty. The human Dominion was no longer the shining beacon it had once claimed to be, it was a system of oppression, of unchecked power, of promises broken time and time again. But even as Yerrick Solan rose in prominence, he found himself confronted with a deeper dilemma. The human spirit that had fueled his rebellion was now threatened by the Arcaris. The very forces he had hoped to defeat with his message of freedom and justice were now threatening to crush them all. If the Arcaris intervened directly in the rebellion, there would be nothing left of humanity's fight for self-determination. And worse, if humanity couldn't unite against the true threat, the entire galaxy could fall under the shadow of forces far beyond human comprehension. At the heart of the rebellion, Yerrick gathered his inner circle in the cold, dimly lit command center aboard their flagship, the Liberator. His brow furrowed in deep thought as he looked at the data streams, reports of the Dominion's movements, and the transmission from the Arcaris that still lingered in his mind. "We cannot let fear guide us," Yerrick said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of the situation. "The Arcaris may be powerful, but they cannot break our will. They cannot control what we choose to do, or who we choose to be." One of his advisors, a seasoned rebel commander named Alara, spoke up. "But they're not like the Cinder, Yerrick. They're not just an enemy we can fight with guns and ships. They are ancient, they are everywhere, and they can see inside our very souls. We have to ask ourselves, what are we fighting for? Is it worth facing a power like that?" Yerrick turned to Alara, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. "It's always worth it. Freedom is worth fighting for. Our future, our destiny, is worth it. The Arcaris may control minds, but they cannot control hearts. As long as we have our hearts, we will never lose. That's the power we still have, our humanity." But Jarek's words, no matter how powerful, couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that gripped him. The Arcaris had already proven their power. The Cinder were nothing in comparison to the psychic might of the Arcaris, and Yerrick knew that their intervention would force humanity to make an impossible choice, to bow before the Arcaris' will, or to risk everything and face them head-on. As the war raged on, the Arcaris began to make their presence felt in subtle, yet terrifying ways. People on both sides of the conflict began to experience strange phenomena, visions, dreams, and inexplicable thoughts that clouded their judgment. Soldiers who had been fighting for the Dominion suddenly found themselves questioning their loyalty, while some rebels began to experience bouts of doubt, as if an unseen hand were guiding their every move. Entire colonies began to fall into a deep, psychic stupor, unable to resist the Archery's influence. In the midst of this chaos, President Rhodes was faced with the ultimate test. Should she continue to fight the rebellion, trying to restore order to the fractured Dominion, or should she seek a new path, a path that could bring unity to humanity in the face of a threat that transcended politics and war? Rhodes made her decision. The time for negotiations had passed. She knew that humanity's future would not be decided by diplomacy alone. It would require a show of strength, a strength that would unite humanity against the Archeris, against the Cinder, and against the forces that sought to divide them. And so, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, Rhodes called upon all of humanity to unite. The human dominion would not fall to forces they could not see, and they would not bend to the will of any power that sought to control their destiny. The war was no longer just about expansion, it was about survival, survival against an enemy that sought to strip them of their very will to fight. And the fight for humanity's future had only just begun. The galaxy was on the brink of a cataclysmic convergence. The human dominion, torn by rebellion and now confronted by the cryptic, terrifying power of the Archeris, found itself in a dire situation. The once proud empire of Earth, which had expanded its influence across countless worlds, now stood at a precipice, its future uncertain. On one side, a rebellion that demanded freedom and the dismantling of the Dominion's oppressive structure; on the other, the Archeris, an ancient race with a power that could shatter minds and alter reality itself. And in the middle of it all, humanity had to decide: would they survive and evolve, or would they succumb to the forces beyond their comprehension? Elena Voss, the once unflinching diplomat of the human dominion, now stood before the Great Hall in the heart of Earth's capital, surrounded by the leadership of the Dominion and the rebel leaders. The air was thick with tension. Her mind raced, knowing that this was the final chance to avert the total collapse of everything humanity had worked to build. There was no turning back now. Yarrick Solon stood across the room, his eyes locked on hers, his face a mask of hardened defiance. The rebellion had grown exponentially over the past few months, and now the balance of power seemed to tip toward him. He knew that the Dominion, weakened and fractured, would fall if it did not change. But as much as he loathed the system he once served, Yarrick knew that if the Archeris made good on their threat, there would be nothing left of humanity, no rebels, no Dominion, no freedom. Nothing. We cannot continue down this path, Voss began, her voice carrying across the room, her tone steady but tinged with an underlying urgency. The Archeris have shown us their power. We cannot fight them directly. We must unite, not for our own empires, but for the survival of humanity. We need to end this war before it is too late. Yarrick, his posture rigid with the weight of his own convictions, shook his head. You want us to kneel to their will? To submit? I'm not asking for your empire to fall, Elena. But I'm asking for us to have a say in our future. The rebellion is not just about power, it's about ensuring that no one can control us. Not you. Not the Archeris. Not anyone. I'm not asking you to surrender your will, Yarrick, Voss replied, her voice growing firmer. I'm asking you to consider the consequences of further resistance. The Archeris are not invincible, but they will make us all feel the price of defiance. If we keep fighting, we risk losing everything, our future, our very identities as humans. The room fell silent. Every leader present, from both the Dominion and the Rebellion, felt the weight of the moment. The Cinder, the Archeris, the Rebellion, the Dominion, all of it felt like pieces on a chessboard, manipulated by forces none of them truly understood. But there was one undeniable truth in the air: humanity was at a crossroads. Jarrek's gaze softened, the flames of anger still burning in his eyes, but now tinged with doubt. He took a step forward, his voice barely a whisper. And what happens if we do unite? What happens to the people we've fought for? The worlds we've liberated from the shackles of the Dominion's reach? Voss took a deep breath, her resolve unwavering. We rebuild, Yarok. We change. We build something new, not out of power, but out of compassion and cooperation. The galaxy is large, and humanity has the potential to reshape it. But we cannot do that if we destroy each other first. Jarek's mind raced. He had spent so long fighting, so long carrying the banner of rebellion, that the idea of peace seemed like an impossible dream. But looking around at the faces of the soldiers, on both sides, he saw the same exhaustion, the same yearning for a future without war. He had always believed in the idea of freedom, of self-determination, but now he realized that true freedom could not exist in the shadow of annihilation. It would be a hollow victory if they destroyed the very thing they fought to preserve. A soft hum began to resonate in the room, and a deep, alien voice filled the air. It was the Orcs, their presence inescapable, their minds pressing against every person in the room. You have chosen your path, humans. The choice has been made. Your unity will determine the fate of your species. We will no longer interfere directly in your conflict, but know this, the consequences of your decision will be felt across the stars. If you stand together, you may have a future. If you stand divided, you will have none. The voice faded, leaving behind an ominous silence. The weight of the Archery's final warning settled over the assembly. For the first time in the entire conflict, the leaders of the rebellion and the Dominion found themselves standing on common ground, united by the understanding that their survival was no longer guaranteed. In the days that followed, the foundations for peace were forged in secret meetings and tense negotiations. Elena Voss and Yarok Solon found common ground, their mutual respect for humanity's potential overriding their differences. The galaxy watched as the human Dominion made the most difficult decision it had ever faced, to undergo a monumental transformation. It was no longer a question of maintaining power, but of ensuring the survival of the species. A new government was formed, one that would distribute power more equally among the colonies, ensuring that the people, not just Earth, would have a voice in their future. The rebellion, once seen as a rogue faction, was now part of the new order, its leaders guiding the Dominion through its restructuring. Earth, once the heart of an empire, now stood as a symbol of humanity's capacity to change, to evolve, and to grow beyond its past mistakes. And as for the Orcs, though they remained silent, their presence loomed in the background, ever watchful, reminding humanity that their future was not guaranteed. But humanity had proven one thing that day, that it could adapt, could rise from the ashes of its former self, and could face whatever challenges the universe threw at it. The galaxy was vast, and the journey ahead would be long. But for the first time in a long while, humanity was ready to walk that path, together.